All right, this is OneLastMidnight, and welcome back to another episode of the Dyson Sphere Program. Today we're going to look at power strategies, from early strategies to late strategies. So let's go ahead and get started. First, we're going to look at wind, because wind is one of the first pieces of power that you get in the game. A great strategy for wind is just to cut the planet in half. Now, this is assuming that you're on your starting planet and you have that 100% wind power ratio, and you're not on some other planet that's got a lower ratio. If you're on a planet that has a higher than 100% ratio, this will also work very well. The other thing to do is find where the equator and the prime meridian meet. This is pretty easy to achieve because in your lower left-hand corner there are coordinates for the planet. So just get as close to 0, 0 as possible, and you are at the intersection of the equator and the prime meridian. The equator runs from east to west, the prime meridian from north to south. First, start off by placing your wind turbine right in that center point, and then start working along the equator. And set down a wind turbine as close as you possibly can to the next one. And do this around the entire planet. If there's water blocking your way, make sure you put down some foundation pieces so you can continue placing the wind turbines. By the time you're done, you should have something that looks like this, where you have your planet is pretty much cross-haired with wind turbines. You can see from the planetary view, I've got them all the way around from pole to pole, going along the equator and along the prime meridian. Ultimately, this process took 218 wind turbines, roughly about, I would say, 2,000 foundation pieces, and a mass quantity of soil. If you're starting out in the beginning of the game, you're not going to have that much soil, but as you lay down the wind turbines, you will gain soil, and then you also might have to lay down, whether it be a smelter or a miner, something along those lines to gather more soil. But you can easily gather soil by laying those down and just quickly deleting them. Ultimately, all those 218 wind turbines produces 65.4 megawatts of power. Now, if you look at my current production base, I'm using roughly about 130 megawatts of power. So this is, half, and it's 100% sustainable. I don't have to waste any resources inside of the thermal power generators. So it's a pretty effective solution if you want to gather some wind power. Also, as a bonus, you wind up getting a power network pretty much across your entire planet. So that brings us to solar. Let's look at solar power and an effective use of solar power. Now, I took a time-lapse video of the rotation of the planet, and what I found out is that if you're standing at the north or south pole, what you'll find out is half of the pole is lit at all times. So this makes up a very effective place to set up a solar power system. So I flattened one of the poles with some foundation pieces, and I'm going to start laying out my solar power. Again, the nice thing about solar power is you can just stack them right next to each other. When you're done, you should have something that looks like this, where in the center pole, you've got your solar power panels all set up. They're nice, tightly packed together, and they're gathering up that solar energy from the sun. You can see that the outermost panels are getting 100% of the sun, and the panels furthest away from the sun are not receiving 100%, but they're still gathering energy. Now, this setup varies a lot based on the orbit inclination and your planet axle inclination. So you'll notice that while the South Pole is getting plenty of sun, the North Pole is not getting as much. You can see it's not as bright as it is on the South Pole. And that's because of the planet's axis inclination. But regardless, even my North Pole, which is not getting enough sun, is still generating a decent amount of energy. Again, the panels that are closest to the sunlight are gathering 100% intensity, whereas the panels furthest away are only gathering 46% efficiency. So less than the pole that has the most power, but again, I'm still gathering energy. The amount of energy that's gathered from both of the poles is very similar to the amount of energy gathered if you set up the whole wind solution. So I'm getting roughly about 64 megawatts of power, bringing both of these systems together at 130 megawatts of power, and I'm not having to use any fuel whatsoever to generate this energy. Your mileage is going to vary, again, based off of your planet type and the inclination and a few other factors. But otherwise, this is a great solution to be able to produce energy. So you can see with all the production that I have going on and all the base pieces that I have on here, 132 megawatts of power is nothing to shake a stick at. You're able to do a lot of things. Have a pretty decent sized factory with 132 megawatts of power. The renewable energy is a great solution, but let's talk about thermal power. Thermal power is probably the next one you're going to get, and it's one you're going to use quite often and probably all the way into your end game. When you first get thermal power, you're going to set up a coal burning thermal power solution. Now, coal burns relatively quickly. It's not the most efficient thing on the planet to burn, but it is very helpful because it's right there and it's easily accessible right in the beginning of the game. Once you have energetic graphite unlocked and you're producing energetic graphite, you should switch over these coal burning thermal power stations to be energetic graphite burning power stations. You can see how quickly the coal is burning, and if you look at the energetic graphite, it's burning probably at half its speed. This is going to be your early game thermal power station solution. Energetic graphite into the thermal power stations. After you've unlocked oil production, which you're absolutely going to need to make the red matrix cubes, you're going to start producing a mass quantity of hydrogen. Also, when you unlock the orbit collector, you could start pulling in hydrogen from your gas giants. At this point in time, you should think about moving over your thermal power stations to burning solely hydrogen. You're going to have it in abundance. The burn rate is slightly slower than the energetic graphite, but this is something that is an infinite power source if it's coming directly from your gas giants. And also because of the oil production process, you're just going to have so much of it. It just makes sense to start burning it and have a large quantity of thermal power stations providing your energy. So if you don't want to do the wind and the solar energy solution, thermal power stations burning coal, then energetic graphite, and then hydrogen is going to be the way to go for power. And finally, the last two energy sources, which is fusion and the miniature sun. I'll be 100% honest, I don't find them as useful right now. Now, you might have a different story. My system does not have a lot of deuterium in it, and so I'm having to manually produce the deuterium, and having to produce the deuterium fuel rods is extremely time intensive, and I'm just not producing as much as I would like to have. If you have a system that has a gas giant that's producing mass quantities of deuterium, then, this mini fusion power station might be the way to go. Currently I'm having to struggle making deuterium fuel rods, so I just don't have that ability to produce such large quantities of deuterium, and running the miniature particle collider is extremely expensive. The same is true for the artificial star for me right now. Now, like I said, this might change in the future for my particular playthroughs. I might, have the opportunity to import from another star system or be able to produce more of what I need antimatter wise to produce the antimatter fuel rods. But in my current playthrough right now, fusion and the artificial star are just a little bit too hard to maintain for power right now. Now, while I did just mention the artificial star, we're not looking at the Dyson energy solutions and what you could possibly do with that. That is in another video. But I hope you learned a couple different power strategies from this video. Well, that's it for me. If you haven't already, hit that like button. If you're not a subscriber, please subscribe. I'd love to have you in the community. If you want to follow me on any of my social media, you can find the links in the description below. And make sure to hit that notification bell. That way you know when I go live and when I post new videos. I'll talk to you later. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.